Hello, this is Ms. Howington here at Research Triangle High School. Today we are talking about ways that heat can move between objects and through space. So this can happen in one of three ways. So it can happen by conduction, convection, or radiation. We'll talk about all three of them. All right, so conduction is the direct transfer of heat from one object to another. So some objects conduct heat better than others, and we call those conductors. Those are things like metals. And some things are bad at transferring heat from one object to another, and we call those insulators, like wood, and air is not so great at it either. And so those things, insulators, they don't necessarily stop the flow of heat, but they just slow it down a lot. So like a piece of wood will still get hot and the air will still get hot. It just takes a lot longer than a piece of metal does. Some good examples of conduction are hot sand on the beach. So the heat from the sand is directly transferred to your little feet and it hurts. Or a pot on the stove. So the heat from the eye on the stove is directly transferred to the pot because they are touching. So in conduction, the really important thing is that the two objects have to be touching. Okay. And then we have convection. Convection is the heat transfer through fluid. So the really important thing about convection is that it has to happen in fluids. So lots of things are fluids, including water and air and the inside of the earth, or at least part of the inside of the earth. So those are all fluids. Or chocolate, melted chocolate can be a fluid, whatever. Maybe I just want some chocolate. All right, so when the molecules in things get hot, in liquids get hot, they move around faster and their molecules are spread out more. So this means that they're less dense. Things that are less dense tend to rise up to the top and will float on top of things that are more dense. So things that are cold have molecules that are closer together. And so these things are more dense. So you have more mass in a smaller unit area. And so these things will tend to sink. And so we have hot, less dense fluid floating up to the top, and cooler, more dense fluid sinking down to the bottom. And we get these convection cells or convection currents. So a good example of this is hot water moving to the top of a pot like we have here. So again, these hot water molecules are being heated. They're down near a heat source. They're being heated, so they get less dense, and they float up to the top. And then they cool down because they're farther away from their heat source, so their molecules get colder together, and it gets more dense, so it sinks down to the bottom. And you get these little circular currents. All right. And then, last but not least, we have radiation. So radiation is when heat is transferred by electromagnetic waves. So electromagnetic waves they come in lots of different lengths, and everything from sunlight to ultraviolet light that we can't see, and X-rays and radio waves, those are all on the electromagnetic wave spectrum. So all objects in the entire universe emit and absorb some radiant energy, as long as they're not 0 degrees Kelvin, and we haven't found anything that is yet. So everything emits some sort of radiation, some sort of energy. And so objects that are hotter than others or better at others at emitting radiation are things that are hotter. So radiation on Earth. So our Earth absorbs some energy from the sun when it hits the ground, and then it re-emits it at a different wavelength, at a longer wavelength. And so that's called terrestrial radiation. So radiation that's emitted by the Earth is called terrestrial radiation. And our gases in the atmosphere trap that heat, those wavelengths, and that helps keep us warm. We'll talk about the greenhouse effect more later. But radiation is really cool. It's the only type of heat transfer that can happen with absolutely nothing to travel through. So remember, convection has to travel through liquids. Conduction has to travel from one thing to another. They have to be touching. Radiation can just travel through space with nothing for it to travel through. So like our sun here, so our sun is, doing nuclear fusion in its core and emitting some energy, and that energy is traveling in those electromagnetic waves all the way through space, through the vacuum of space, to get to us at Earth to warm us up. And then Earth is taking some of that radiation and keeping it and then re-emitting it out into our atmosphere, and it helps keep us warm both ways. All right, so those are the three mechanisms of heat transfer. Remember, we have conduction, convection, and radiation, and we will talk about them more in class and how they all benefit us and help us out.